Good afternoon and welcome to the Monday, November 3rd, 2008 informational meeting of the Sioux Falls City Council. I see all of our members are present, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. First up on the docket is the City Council staff report. We're getting updates from Deborah A. Owen, City Clerk.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Sioux Falls City Council. Just a couple of reminders. Today is a fiscal committee meeting after the 4 o'clock. And then also, the staff and I put together some of the notes from last Monday's informational where the council had discussed their 2009 legislative priorities. So on your desk, you'll find the previous one from 2008 legislative session, and then you'll find some notes. It's not in its final form by any stretch for your council legislative priorities for the year 2009. If you'd like to review those and hopefully let us know how you would like those to read, we'll get those ready for you and on the agenda, in part to make those ready for the Breakfast Club meeting, which I believe happens later this month. In addition, you'll find some notes from the Land Use Committee meeting, the railroad overpass policy, made copies for you, and then also the summary of some recycling issues. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deborah. Questions of Deborah? Comments? Very good. Seeing nobody here from the mayor's office, we will move on to the Audit Committee. Pat, have you got a report for us?
No report other than next week at the informational, Rich will be presenting an Audit Department. Report? Water Department report.
The Water Department
Yep.
report? Very good. This will be an audit of the Water Department, I take it? Very good. Very good. Okay. Yeah, questions of Pat? Very good. Next, we will have the Fiscal Committee. Do I have Gerald?
As Deborah already suggested, we have a meeting right after today's informational meeting, and everyone's invited.
Thanks. Well, sounds like quite a party. I think I'll
Yeah,
stop in here and see what's going on. Land Use Committee, I know we met last week. Greg, would you care to give an update?
Yes. Thank you, Bob. Mr. Chairman. Let's see, we had quite an attendance at the last Land Use Committee. It was very nice. Councilor Costello was there, Councilor Litz, and Councilor Staggers was all present. And we had Mark Cotter and Kevin Schmidt. And then there was the guy in charge of the landfill. Gosh, sorry. Dave McRoy. Anyway, we did learn a lot. We had a couple items we covered. One was the railroad crossing policy for the east side per Councilor Benniga's request. And what we kind of learned there was that 57th was a challenge because of the residents nearby. But after it was all said and done, the residents in that neighborhood are very happy, is what I'm hearing from what happened with the bridge and its outcome, finally. At first it wasn't so good, but at the end I think most people are happy. And we talked about the challenge moving forward on other arterial streets, being 69th and 85th, and even 101st, and what challenges might occur with those roads in the future when we get out there. And planning further ahead, it's going to be a lot easier for us moving ahead because we'll get this new bridges done before the neighborhoods get developed. And the new planning codes that are out there are not going to allow a development to have multiple crossings across a railroad track. So there's only going to be crossings at these major arterial roads. So it'll be easier, safer. Cost involved with building each of these bridges starts at about $2 million just for the bridge, and you could add in another $500,000 if you have to acquire more land, depending on how it goes. 57th was a challenge. 69th is a little bit of a challenge because of the school nearby, but it doesn't seem to be a big problem, and it should be overcome easily. There's a bridge, there's a railroad crossing on Cliff Avenue, right near the Sioux River, that creates a lot of problems for people, but we talked about how long it might take for that bridge to be a bridge to go over the railroad tracks there, but the issue at hand there is that there's a lot of life left in that bridge that goes over the Sioux River, and it's all going to have to be done in the same kind of construction project, so that's a little bit of a challenge. We need to get a little more life out of that bridge before we go and tear it out. so we can build another bridge to overpass the railroad tracks. So look for that to come later in life, if that's a fair way to say it, but sometime in the future when it probably becomes more economical. And then we also talked about the garbage. We did a little trash talking. It was pretty good. And a lot of good insights there, a lot of good, just open discussion about our current policy, whether or not we need to make changes to it, what else we could do to increase recycling efforts. I think as it is now, the landfill is expected to last another 50 years if we continue the process of the rate of filling it as we do now and the recycled efforts that are in progress. If we all step up and do more recycling, we can only extend the life of that landfill, and that's better for all of us if we can do that. There's a new sustaining coordinator who's coming on at the end of the year. And I had her name once, but I don't have it anymore. But she is going to be in charge of creating a master plan for the city and its recycling efforts. And she's going to do some surveying. She's going to try to figure out exactly what customers want to do with recycling and how much they're willing to do. And maybe that'll start driving our efforts on this end on what we should be doing to create any new legislation if necessary. We're doing whatever we can to extend the life of the landfill. So once she comes on, I know she'll come in front of the council and be introduced by Public Works, but she looks to be a great addition to the landfill department and should help all of us in the city extend the life of the landfill and in our efforts to recycle. I don't know if anybody has any questions, I guess.
I'd just like to add to that the curbside recycling thing resurfaced again, and I'm wondering if that isn't going to be one of those topics that's going to come back to revisit us in the future. It seems like there's some interest and controversies involved with that, so I can't see us escaping from that too long. I'd also like to add that the 57th Street thing, I went out to the USF football game on Saturday afternoon. It was a beautiful day, and when I got done, I went down 69th Street, and I turned at Southeastern and drove there. And, of course, it's still gravel on 69th Street past the school, but the Southeastern Drive, the 4 lanes off of 57th Street, are almost done to where I think the intersection is going to come in, and it's very nice. It is very, very good looking. I really like the new design aspects of our new arterial streets. And then I took a left on 57th Street, and I would have to say those are all 4 lanes of that are probably going to be open pretty soon. And that bridge is so nice and so smooth. And Greg is right. I had an opportunity to talk to somebody that lives on Arden Avenue, and I've known these folks for quite a few years, and they're very pleased with the new bridge and all the comforts that go along with it. The reduced traffic, the cars hitting the tracks in the middle of the night, you can hear that, and the train whistles are subsided now. So there's been a lot of advantages to that neighborhood for putting that big bridge up there, in spite of the controversies that were originally there. Questions of Greg? Mr. Bennigan?
I guess my questions are not so much about current status of 57th Street, because as being the representative from that area, I've been involved with that for 3 years, and I can give you a list of people who aren't quite as happy as the ones you've talked to. The issue for me is the whole conversation and debate which needs to take place on how often we have overpasses over the railroad tracks. It's a $2 million, $2.5 million investment. We have plenty of streets in this community that don't have overpasses, all the way from 6th, 8th, 12th, 14th, 18th, 26th Street, 41st Street, 49th Street, whatever. And I think the conversation needs to prioritize the spacing, if you will, between those bridges to make sure that we have an alternative that could be used, that we could use, such as railroad signals, the crossing bars or whatever, versus a $2.5 million overpass. So, and I understand it's going to be real sensitive. We're always concerned about safety in this community, and that's the #1 priority. But we've got examples currently that would say that we don't need one every 12 blocks. And I think that will be a conversation that we'll need to have through the budget process when we're talking about infrastructure needs and all the other things that we've had to face in the last few months.
By every 12 blocks, I'm assuming you mean the mile on the arterioles. Is that correct, Gerald? Yeah, you know, I guess it's been my impression that, you know, folks in sometimes really are resistant to change, and that 57th Street had been there for quite a while as it was, and I think that as we go on out in our new design standards with the roads and the bridges having one every mile, I think if folks know that that's the way it's going to be and they plan for that, I don't know, I think the adjustment will be made. But I agree, and I don't know, I didn't run into anybody, of course, I'm not in that district, that was strongly disagreed, but I know that the couple that I talked to weren't real fond of it and had controversies in the beginning, and they live about a block away from that railroad, or the new overpass, and they're pleased at least, so.
My follow-up comment on that, Bob, would be is that the people closest to the bridge aren't the ones that are disappointed. It's the ones who are further east from that, whose properties are now, instead of being 40 or 50 feet from 57th Street, are actually about 28 to 30 feet away. And that's probably where the issue came when there was construction done and the housing market was in place before the roads were changed. So that is a significant issue for those people who are now very much part of that traffic pattern.
See. Questions? Great.
I know that some of the other discussion that occurred was that by planning for these overpasses much further in advance, we'll know we won't have to deal with that encroachment like we did on 57th Street. We just have to start these processes a lot sooner than we might like. So we're going to have to start allocating funds sooner to purchase some of that land that we're going to need. And I think it's probably going to be well worth it if we plan it in advance so that we prevent all those problems that we learned. And I think talking to the Public Works Department, they did learn a lot during this process. It sounds like it was their first, which is hard to believe, but it was their first bridge over our railroad tracks. That seems to be a big learning curve, and I think the next process will go better, and we'll be out ahead of it a lot better than we were in 57th Street. And I know there's policies in place for those other roads that there's an intersection. I think there's a lot of intersections that are safety concerns, and I think they're going to be re-looked at each chance to improve safety.
Anybody else? Well, it's a good thing we leveled that second penny so we can pay for these arterials in the future. Okay, the Public Services Committee. Kenny?
We have no update today. We are working on two issues, security here at the council chambers and an event ordinance, and we'll update you on those later.
Very good. Questions of Kenny? Comments of Kenny? Okay, I guess I got a question here. I see next we have City Council open discussion. Would the council like to put that off? I see we have some guests with us here today, and maybe if we went through that and then had open discussion later on, does that sound reasonable to everybody? All right, I guess with that we'll move number 9 up to number 8, and we'll move our little talk. I'm sure you guys will hang around for it anyway afterwards. But a couple of gentlemen are here that have been seeing entirely too much of me lately, and probably Pat here. We've got Mr. Winkles and his son are here to give us a presentation on our city space needs assessment. And there's been quite a bit of I don't know if it's anxiety, but there's been certain people interested in this for quite a while, and now it's coming to fruition. So I don't know which one of you gentlemen. Mike, are you coming forward to introduce them then? Okay, Mike Cooper for Planning is going to do the introductions here.
Good afternoon, Mike Cooper, Planning and Building Services. I just want to give a quick intro to this topic because I know that we all have been anticipating this report for quite some time. But in looking at the needs of space at City Hall for the administration has been a topic that has come up in the past. I know that we've had various times in previous years that we've looked at what the needs are for space requirements. And I would just say that this presentation that you're going to hear today really came about as a result of discussions primarily looking at how can we provide better customer service at City Hall for people that are coming there for various types of permits. Public Works through the engineering issues various types of permits. Building Services issues different types of permits. And also looking at how can we bring our Fire Rescue Administration and that whole permitting process into City Hall so that we would kind of create the concept of a one-stop shop. And as we got together with various staff and started looking at that seriously, we knew that we needed some outside assistance to help us do the inventory and analysis and kind of work through the different directors' needs in a very professional process. So the mayor assigned a group of directors, which included Mark Cotter, Mike Hall, Jennifer Holson, and myself, along with Jody Schwan, to kind of spearhead this process. And we decided to bring in the Winkles Group because of their history with looking at this in the past and also their knowledge of that building along with the what we now call the City Hall Annex building. So what you're going to hear today is an executive summary of a process that really began in 2007 with an initial analysis of identifying existing and future needs by department, and then taking that into another phase of looking at different options that we could identify to meet the needs for that space in the future. And Bob Winkles, along with Ross Winkles, are both here to go through the analysis with you today. And this is really a report today that we're submitting to you as an informational item. And if we do decide to move forward with this in the future, then we would be implementing that through requests for CIP dollars to address this in various phases, as you'll hear today. So that's my quick overview, and I'll turn it over to Bob and Ross.
Thanks, Mike. I'm Bob Winkles, and as Mike explained, this is my son Ross. Sometimes these sons turn into somebody. A couple guys over here, Anderson and Jamesons, have learned. And so he's been with us since he got out of college about 7 years ago. So what I'd like to do, we have a PowerPoint put together today, and basically the slides that would come up in front of you or up here for the public are all contained in a report that you were just provided with today. And virtually every page in this report is in this PowerPoint. The only exception would be when we get to Section 4, which is the department organizational chart for each department of City Hall. That's the only part that we're only going to have the first page up here and not repeating all these in the PowerPoint. So after today, it will be put on the city's website, and so anyone in the public or press can certainly go after that and copy it, download it, and they'll have everything except the organizational charts, and those are easily available too if they'd like that. So starting, Ross, with the table of contents, you can just page through that. It just gives you a basic idea of what the tabs are and how you can find the various sections. And then right after the table of contents is the executive summary. And that is one page that I'd like to go through in more detail, actually read it, because especially for those that probably can't read it up here, at least you'll know what that says. The City of Sioux Falls has experienced significant growth since its City Hall was constructed in 1935. Projections show that continued growth is expected over the next 15 to 20 years. Sioux Falls citizens expect that public facilities and public programs are efficient and accessible. The city's administrative staff has been growing to support the increased demand. Staff space needs have been steadily outgrowing the facilities. Although it is of historic significance, City Hall is small and is not user-friendly. Important city departments have been relocated to other buildings over the years, making it more difficult for staff and public interaction. Currently, 167 city employees work in City Hall. In 2007, the Health Department moved into a new joint city-county facility, vacating the 1919 Annex building north of City Hall. Kermit, I'm on page 1, just going through the executive
Okay,
summary.
thanks,
I
Bob.
wanted to make sure we covered that. Much of the vacated space is being temporarily used by the library while its main branch is undergoing renovation and addition. In order to quantify the issues surrounding the current and future utilization of space, a committee of 4 city department heads was formed, as Mike explained, and this analysis was conducted. It involved 5 primary tasks: research of the office space needs, review of the existing office space, comparative analysis, in other words, reviewing those projected needs versus the available space, then review of options, what to do about it, and then a phasing plan, which kind of grew out of one of the options that seemed the most obvious to pursue. When considering the city departments which regularly interact with each other and the public, the existing occupied space is currently 20% less than the need. Within the next 3 to 5 years, this need is expected to grow, making the demand 26% greater than the currently available space. If all space in City Hall and the annex were immediately available, the combined net area is about 11% less than the 3 to 5 year need projection. So in other words, if we didn't have the library going in there and we didn't have some of the other uses that are going in there today, if that annex building was completely empty and we were to use both buildings together, it'd still be 11% less than what the 3 to 5 year projection of the space need is. Thus, simply growing into the annex is not a long-term solution. Options of constructing entirely new facilities or renovating and adding to existing facilities were reviewed. Conceptual budget estimates were developed, and the results suggested renovation and addition may be the most economical short-term and long-term options. A phasing plan was developed, and this plan coordinates renovation and occupancy as space becomes available and establishes a timeline which can be used to fund the improvement over a period of years. An efficient, accessible, cost-effective, and user-friendly facility can be developed utilizing existing assets. So as we go along the way here, if someone has a question, go ahead and interrupt me, and I'll address something if it's fuzzy. It may get addressed along the way as we go through, but there are going to be sections that I'm not going to go through all the detail. Otherwise, we'd be here for a couple hours. But so then going to Section 1, the description of the work. So now we're basically talking about the scope. And in this scope section, it basically says that we're addressing those administrative offices. We're not addressing things like the parks and the police and others that are away from City Hall and that administrative office use just by their nature. And the same with some of the departments that may be partially in City Hall and partially located somewhere else. We also want to address them. So if the fire administrative and prevention comes into City Hall, they still have a lot of things going on in other buildings scattered around town, and we're not dealing with those. So then we have the 5 primary tasks. So the first was to research the office needs. We conducted interviews with all the department heads within those identified buildings, and we re-interviewed those people, and once we would look at the information, give them our feedback as to here's what we understand are your projections for staff, and then we questioned some of those needs because this wasn't simply shopping at the candy store. So in other words, from our experience in working out in the private sector, we know what's reasonable for certain offices, and so if someone came and had an office need of 250 square feet, well, we've got some questions about that. And thus we would feed them back some things that in some cases you'll see said they needed less space than they're in right now. And so that's built into this. Then we updated that. We started with those interviews in March of 07, and we updated those through July of 08 because that's kind of a changing situation. Then we reviewed the existing office space. So we went into every department's space, took a look at it, and we actually have their layouts in here of where their furniture was at the time that we were conducting this, and compared then those spaces and how maybe some things could be different than they are today. Then we did that comparative analysis that said, okay, here are all the numbers, and here's how they work out, here's what's available, and they don't One doesn't satisfy the other, so something's got to be done. That's basically what the comparative analysis was about. Then we reviewed the options and really said, what could you do about it? And then had a phasing plan that followed through. Now, the definitions, this is very technical information, which is over on the right up in the upper screen if you're following there in the audience. Those definitions basically take you through what is a square foot when we say so many square feet. What is a net square foot versus a gross square foot? Those kinds of things. And it is important that people understand a little bit, if they say, well, I only need 100 square feet. Well, that's a 10 by 10 office. That has not included the thickness of the walls around the office, doesn't include the hallway to get there. Those are things within a department that are the difference between a department net and a department gross. You can add up all those 10 by 10 offices, but now you've got to get a gross factor for all the halls and duct chases and all the things that are within the department. And then you have to leave the department and get a building gross for the lobbies, the stairs, the elevator, all the things that are serving the various departments. So it keeps combining, and getting to a bigger and bigger number, and sometimes can be confusing to people when they see a net number versus a gross number. So that basically talks about all of those things and definitions. Then in design efficiencies, that's another one. We just address generally what would be an efficient design if you had an open office layout where they had workstations instead of offices with doors and walls. And there are different efficiencies depending on how you lay them out. And then also, what's an efficient layout for a building? And certainly City Hall isn't, with its wide second floor corridor and big lobbies on the first floor. That doesn't fall within an efficient number when you compare that versus buildings out there. So we address that a little bit. Then you get into Section 2. I'll get into this one a little more in detail now. For the audience in the upper left is the first page I'll address, and we talked about, there's been discussion about a city-county joint administrative building. That wasn't part of our task. That was just kind of out there in public discussion. But regardless of that discussion, if you were going to build a new city hall by yourself somewhere or with somebody else, you'd still need to know what you need. And so we're only addressing what the city's need is here, and we're talking about our findings of this report. This is kind of a summary of that. Says the department gross need in the next 3 to 5 years is 56,587 square feet. So if you can see this small out here in the audience, where Ross now has his arrow, that's that number, 56,587. Then there are some spaces which you currently have inside City Hall, which is the old council chambers, a shared conference room there. You've got a shared conference on the second floor. You've got some storage down in the parking area in the basement. If you were to go build somewhere else, you'd need to replace those things. Those aren't within the departments. And so we've said there's 5,000 square feet that you need to build there, and that totals 61,587. Again, for the audience, it's up here. Then we've got a building gross factor, because that is just the departments and just the storage and whatnot. That has nothing to do with all the lobby and stairs and elevator and all of that. And we add 30%, which would be an efficient design for that building. That's 18,413. So now you're up to 80,000 square feet. That's what you'd need to build if you were going to satisfy a 3 to 5 year need. But we would be recommending that you, if you're going to build something, you build it bigger and you build a shell space that could be grown into. And we're saying in this case, we think a fourth, 25%, 20,000 square feet would be a smart thing to do. So that brings us to a 100,000 square foot building if you went someplace else and built a new building. And again, this is just for comparison purposes. Then we say, let's put some dollars to that. And using today's dollars, this doesn't have any inflation for future, we'd say $180 a square foot is what it would cost you to build that shell and finish those spaces. And that's relatively modest finishes inside in today's dollars. And then the shell space, you would be bringing electrical, mechanical to those spaces, but not finishing them. We'd say $120 a square foot. So that was, the first line was 14.4 million, 2.4 million, and those in the audience, here are the numbers that we're adding up right now for estimates. And then the data center in itself, in addition to the square footage, you'd have a number that it costs you to put the infrastructure and everything to support a data center. We say that's worth $700,000. Site improvements, you're going to need to bring utilities and all the site type improvements would be $1 million. And now if we go somewhere else, we're going to have some parking. And we're thinking that if it's in the downtown area especially, it's a ramp. And so we're being realistic about saying 200 stall ramp at 17 grand a stall is 3.4 million. So to go somewhere and do that today, we're saying is about $22 million. So we say, let's go to the other side now and compare the opposite of that and say, if we stay in our existing buildings and capture the value in those shells, what does that do for the same size of building? So now we go down and say the current available department gross is that 51,000 number. For those in the audience, we're down here now. With the shared spaces, we'd have to do the same thing in the existing facilities. Those are 5,000 square feet. Now, if we were to tear the buildings apart and have the interior design be more efficient at 30%, like we would in a new building, that's that 17,000 gross factor. You've got 73,000 there available in those two buildings. But to compare apples and apples, we've got to build 27,000 new to get up to 100,000, and that's coming down below here. So then we did a renovation estimate. If we spend $100 a square foot, that's right down here, that'd be $7.3 million. If we spent 200 grand to improve our 193 stall parking ramp, which exists there, there's another 200,000, so that's 7.5 million. Now if we built additions to these buildings, 27,000 to make it apples and apples with the new alternative at $180, the same price per square foot, it's a little over 4.8. There's the data center again. So now you're comparing 13 million. This is kind of the lower cost scenario versus the 22 million if you went out and did it new. So that was one of the things as we met with the group, and this is over a period of time, that we talked about these issues and said, well, obviously we'd be walking away from some inherent value in the shells of the buildings we had now, and couldn't there be something in between that would allow us to kind of grow into these buildings and do these additions over time if that would be reasonable. So then we worked on a combined phasing plan of renovation with new addition, and that's number 3 on page 6. For you in the audience is over here on the right, not any more easily legible. And we said, okay, if you were to upgrade the systems and renovate the interior of City Hall between 2008 and 2020, that could be a game plan. Then you did some renovation, although it could be minor if you just went in and used the spaces within the annex between 2008 and 2020 and didn't do major renovation. That's in pretty good shape on the interior. And you did some selective demolition. Now we're talking about taking down parts of the city ramp between City Hall and the annex. That was just part of this plan that was developed along, and we'll get into the detail of that a little further. And then construction of a new concourse that would tie the annex and the City Hall together and would be more of a user-friendly link for the public to use. And again, we're out there between 2013 and 2020. So then we just have a few caveats at the bottom here relative to our estimates, so you kind of know where those numbers are relative to current and future numbers. We don't have any inflation. That's all 2008 up to this point. Okay, then let's talk about Section 3. And those are just listing, and I won't read every one of those. I'll just highlight the perhaps the audience can even see the bold headings for each of these, but these were items that really influenced how we got to where we currently are on our recommendation. User-friendly character, and I think Mike covered that already, that it's really tough for people. If you don't know your way around City Hall, it's tough to come and find where you need to go. So even if you're going to purchase a building permit or you're going to pay a parking ticket, those aren't on the main level. You need to go find those someplace. And so anything that could make that easier would be important. Then there are some security concerns. You know, you can basically, at most times, there have been a couple times when we got a little tighter on things, but you can walk in there anytime and walk into anybody's office anytime. And especially the mayor's pretty easily accessible on first floor, and risk management has let us know that they have a grave concern about that. So that's one of the things also that needs to be considered in future improvements. parking, the parking for the public, they have a sense, even though if you know your way around, it's pretty nice around City Hall. But if you don't know your way around, you think it's really unfriendly, and there are hardly any stalls there. And the ramp really isn't for anybody out there in the public. So that perception becomes reality, and that has to be improved. And then future growth. So whatever happens, we've got to make sure we're out there a bunch of years and we're not in another box here in 5-10 years. So whatever's done, that was taken into consideration. Then historic preservation. City Hall's on the historic register. Got to keep that in mind, no matter if we're getting rid of it or using it. It all comes into play. And the annex was even older. It's not on the historic register. It was built in 1919, and it's in the historic district. So there are some issues there, and they need to be addressed in either case. And then the shared spaces. I already mentioned that about the 5,000 square feet, but it is important that that doesn't get left off someplace if we talk about doing a different alternative than we are talking about here. Then in Section 4, and this is the only section which has not been duplicated in its entirety in this PowerPoint presentation. So if someone were to copy it off the internet, they'd only miss out on some of the others. We just put in this one slide on planning and building services to show the typical. We've included in the report how in today's structure each of the departments are structured, because it does matter on how different departments are going to be laid out. And if somebody's looking at this report in 5 or 10 years and the structure is all different, nothing's going to make sense anymore. So we wanted to, and we did one of these about 10 years ago for the city, so we know how much different the structure has changed. Then into department, or Section 5, rather, the department needs research. And now these pages show you the detail that we went through when we'd sit down with the department. And so they go through one by one, and we will have a category, the first column talking about staff currently. Second column will talk about staff in the future. And that's when, and we're talking 3 to 5 years when we're talking future here now. And then we have the existing square footage in one column, the needed square footage if we're going to that staff in 3 to 5 years, and then we'd have the projected out there total. The difference between the last two columns are if you had 2 offices of one type, it would only show up as a single in this column and show up as a double in another. So, also the difference, the needed square footage means needed today. In other words, they're short already versus 3 to 5 years. So then one of the things I'd like to point out, Ross, let's go back a couple of slides here to just take real estate on page 20 as an example. Let's see. You're a little farther back than I want to be. Go forward. Real estate's right there on the bottom. So just as an example, real estate, if you know where they are now, they're kind of next to Public Works on the main level across from the mayor's office. And they're basically in a space that just happens to exist that size. They certainly don't need to be in that size of space. So as you see, this says that the existing square footage is 733. We're saying that they only need 506. They're not changing anything other than becoming more efficient. And even 3 to 5 years, that's 506. And even looking up above, here's planning, or here's Public Works rather, and you can see that the engineering department, which goes partially on this page and then comes on to the next one, but the totals are on page 20 in your report, that the staff is not projected to change in the next 3 to 5 years. It's 42 now, is expected to be 42. And currently there's 8,289 square feet, and we're saying that they don't even need that many. They need about 200 square feet less if the gross factor can change and it becomes more efficient. So that kind of just lets you know that there are some, if you go up into some of the detail here, it'll show you when we thought somebody's office was too big or not big enough and those kinds of things. And we reviewed those things with the department heads. Those are not surprises with them as to what our recommendations were. But overall, if we go through all of those sections and now get back to Section 6, now we'll do a comparative analysis, and this is a summary. So these colors on the left are merely the same color that was used in the breakdown pages preceding, and they will be colors that are used on the floor plan when you go look at a specific department. So these are just the summaries of the various, since building services is under planning, they're both yellow. Public Works, Engineering, Real Estate, and GIS, they're all under the same department, so they're all green. So that's basically the rationale for the colors. But this will give you all of the existing square footages, the summaries. So down on the bottom, the total for the existing building is 44,884. Buildings, and I should say plural, because we have included the fire prevention and fire administration. Those numbers are for the existing spaces they're in at 37th and Minnesota right now. Same with community development, public parking. That's the lower level here. So this isn't just City Hall. This is all of the spaces where they currently are located. And then the next column is what's needed currently, in other words, the differential from what the need is today. And then the last column, 3 to 5 years, what do they need? And so those were the numbers that we talked about early on, the percentages. Then what's available in these two buildings? City Hall has 37,000. Now, you need to be careful because this is available for a department gross. So that's not what the total building is. That's only the gross of the departments. And so you're going to fit these numbers. These are apples and apples, the numbers up here and the numbers down here. And so the total available in both buildings is 51,000, and you can see it's 53.9 for a need currently and 56.6 almost for a need in 3 to 5 years. So that just says it doesn't work with what we're looking at so far in the near future. Then let's look at Section 7. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but for those who are wanting to spend a little more time in the report, you can basically see this first page on the left is page 28, which is the lower level where the mail room was and some of engineering. The rest of this is parking and some of that long-term storage I was talking about, mechanical. And then the ground floor plan, this basically shows it as it was when we were doing this report and pretty much is on this floor today, all of the green being engineering and all of the yellow being the planning and zoning building services area on ground floor. And all of the white is, again, those public spaces, the mechanical, second floor of the mechanical room is here, toilet rooms, and you get the corridors and whatnot. So we'll go through each of the buildings entirely through this section, and again, we won't go through in detail, but this is the top floor of City Hall, and then we'll flip over to the annex building, which is on page, starts on page 33 in your report. And basically the floor plan that you see behind these green shaded areas were the old health department and dental areas previously. So we haven't changed those floor plans on these. And then Section 8 actually talks about the other facilities that are involved here. So page 36 is the lower level downstairs. So all of these are community development public parking spaces that are below us here. And then the next couple of pages are the fire station, number 34, which the whole lower level of that building at 37th in Minnesota is fire prevention and fire administration. And then there's one space that's used on second floor, which is not for the fire station. So that gives you a graphic idea of what those spaces are. Then let's go to Section 9. And on page 39, we start talking about parts of the recommendations. And so, and some of these have been happening because they didn't involve any cost expenditure or CIP dollars, and the space was available. So where central services and risk management was in the northwest corner of first floor of City Hall and needed to get larger, that has moved into existing spaces and spent minimal dollars moving into that at the second floor of the annex building. So that occurred in January of this year. Next. On your next page, 40, also what has happened in January of this year, up on second floor as part of human resources, the human relations portion, the ADA compliance officer, moved down to that area that was vacated by Central Services and Risk Management and is in the brown here. And then another code enforcement officer was brought in, and is in the yellow there on first floor. Again, at minimal cost. And also, going back to that slide, Ross, this area that used to be a part of central service is now a shared conference room currently. Next slide, this is page 41 in your report. This is third floor of City Hall. Again, media services needed expansion space, and they came out of third floor City Hall, moved over to the remainder of second floor in the annex next to Central Services and Risk Management, again with minimal cost, and that is just leaving what is a dental area at second floor of the annex. That was also in January. Then in February, IT, which is on third floor in kind of a separated situation there because of IT, this portion of it is the data center. And the vacated media services were available for expansion, so they moved into that and satisfied some of their expansion needs on third floor in City Hall in February. Then in April of 2008, that's when the library administration and some of their storage came across the street so that construction could happen in the library. So the basement was a bunch of library storage that came over, and then the entire first floor is now being occupied by the library administration just temporarily. Okay, next slide would be page 44 in your reports. This was also in April 2008. The mail room, which was really crying for space on the basement of City Hall, moved over to the basement of the annex in a little bit larger space. You can see it as about double the size, freeing up this space in the basement of City Hall. That was in April. Go ahead and on page, now we'll go into what's happening from now forward, and that'll be under section 10, which is page 45 then is the first page in your reports. We put this slide in here, and it's in the report also, just so people got a feel for what the existing situation is. Even though we live here a lot, it's probably not as obvious to people in the audience or in the public as to what's going on. So the city ramp is between the two buildings. This is the building that we're calling the annex, the former health department building, and then the existing City Hall, and then we'll show it to you as future in a few pages. Then on page 46, this is continuing on now. This is what we're promoting as a recommendation going forward. So next year in spring of '09, we're saying GIS coming out of City Hall on first floor and moving over to the second floor of the annex. And you can see that really isn't a size change as much as it is just getting them out of the way on some other things that we're talking about doing in City Hall. Next page on 47. Now this is in the basement of City Hall, and you remember we took the mailroom out of here, and so that space is available. Engineering is hurting for space, and they could expand in that basement to take over the mailroom, which moved over to the annex this year. Okay, page 48. Now we're talking about taking the planning department from second floor and moving them down where GIS was and where real estate was. And you saw what we were doing as far as moving those others out of that space previously. They would move into first floor, and then part of it, we're seeing this as the director's office and one support person being here near the front of the City Hall building. These are not part of that. This is that code enforcement officer and human relations from the previous move in 2008. Also, we're talking about renovating public works, upgrading this area so that it's more efficiently laid out, and that they could have a shared conference and copy area between planning and public works on first floor, and they do a lot of interaction, and now they're running back and forth up the stairs. Okay, then let's go to the next page, 49. Oh, yes, Ross pointed out that I should, on page 48, call to your attention that we're recommending that a public service counter be developed in the lobby of first floor of City Hall so that I could come in here and pay my parking ticket right here. I could do some business directly, and then if we had some wild person come in here security-wise, we could duck back into a protection of planning department if necessary. But that also might be part of a security plan to have someone out in this space. Okay, next one on page 49. Then we're saying out there in 2010 that we'd do some more relocation coming off first floor of City Hall, get the housing enforcement inspectors plural, up onto second floor where planning had vacated, bring real estate up into this corner, and again you can see they're downsizing. They don't need as much space as they've taken on first floor. That'd have to be simultaneous with this renovation down here. And traffic engineering, which is next to Public Works, would get up and take part of planning also on second floor. Okay, then in page 50, this is 2011 to 2012. So now this is after we've had the library move back to their new building. And now we're talking about on third floor of City Hall, where we need more space in IT, that they'd go over to first floor in the annex building. And that's where some dollars are going to be involved because of putting in the new center there. And then on third floor, now we've got space available, which has just been vacated by IT, to bring the fire prevention and administration into the building. Okay, and next one is page 51. Then what we're talking about doing is in 2013 or thereabouts, that 2 floors would be added to the 8th and Dakota ramp. That was designed to take 2 more stories, and that would give us about 150 spaces in that ramp. And then following that, the reason that we were doing that was to allow us to take down the front portion, which would take out about 1/3 of the City Hall ramp. We're still preserving being able to get onto that upper level. But you see now, this would be third floor of City Hall, a link coming across, tying us into the stairs and the elevator tower of the annex, and also tying us with an interior passageway into this new concourse that we would propose to satisfy long-term needs. And go to the next page. It's the end of our graphics. And now these last 2 pages are meant to just give you a feel in dollars and kind of the game plan of this. We talked about the items in 2008, which you can see there that are completed. Those were all done with money that was in the operations budgets or didn't cost anything. And in 2009, you'll see that we don't see a need to change the CIP either. That those items are either coming out of the facility management budget, that would be on page 53. It's down in phase 2, 2009. You'll see that a couple of these items, the work in City Hall and the annex, other than the fire sprinkler. And currently, over 3 years, you've got $100,000 in your CIP currently in 9, 10, and 11 for sprinkler. So then phase 3, again, we're showing some new, you do have a bunch of dollars already in your CIP, but we're showing some new things that would need attention. And go to page 54 in phase 4, more of the same. We've put some dollars in there, and you can see when we've done an estimate, we say 2 times 1.06. That's inflation for 1 year. So all we're doing is bringing them forward to 2009, which we're comfortable in doing that. But if we were to try to estimate what it is out there 5 years from now, we're not comfortable in estimating that. So we've only given you numbers of 2009, and you're going to have to bring them forward if you decide this is a reasonable plan. So in phase 5, so somewhere in that 2013, 2014 time frame, that's when we're saying the concourse would come in, and we've given you an idea in today's dollars what that concourse would cost. And again, you'd have the one-stop customer service there, the entire main level entrance, which could be right off the sidewalk level now. If you were to eyeball from the sidewalk in front of City Hall, this could keep walking on that level, and you'd be up 1 level higher than you are over in the annex building. And then, long-term, the last 5 years of 2015 through 19, we see a backfilling then coming into City Hall in those spaces where people have moved into the link, and being able to renovate those areas and take care of your future growth. So, a lot of words, a lot of talk. And that gives you kind of an overview of this report, and we're certainly open to questions. See what you think, yep?
Just want to quickly say that as we looked at this concept of a concourse with the link that would connect the existing city hall with the existing annex, obviously, depending on the wishes of the future, that could be designed so it could go up even more floors over time. So what you're seeing there as a graphic, that middle portion could be designed so that long-term it could go up even more floors into the future.
Councilor Knudsen.
Mr. Winkles, thanks for being with us today. One basic question that I should not be confused about. Okay, so when you and Mr. Cooper, or Director Cooper, are talking about the concourse, does concourse mean the same thing as link?
Well,
I'm just confused on
yeah,
something very
this
basic.
whole area right here, when I was talking about walking along the sidewalk here, we see you being able to walk in a door here, and this whole area could be an open concourse, almost like the lobby of City Hall today, only nothing but service counters along there where the public can go directly to help all along that. I would call this a Skyway Link up here, where a concourse link is really just tying the rest of the uses together.
Okay.
And that is just a hallway that would, you know, when you take the jog on each of the levels, the restrooms are right on the end of the open lobbies or open hallway, you jog a little to the west, and you could head right on out with this Skyway Link. Takes you over into the vertical circulation here, elevator and stairs, and it would be right at the back edge of this new building, which when Mike was saying we could be talking 2 stories down here, but it could go 2 stories higher in the future if that was the desire to just build the foundations such today.
Okay. Chairman, may I go ahead with a few other questions for him? Is it could you tell me, so would we ever be able to add any height to the current city hall?
No,
Okay.
would not be able to do that.
And then I was wondering, as far, I just jotted down a bunch of questions here. And then as far as, like, you know, when I was talking about the storage that exists right now over there, I was wondering, could we free up some more space if we accelerate the process as far as getting more records over to Gray Bar, to our storage unit?
Well, that's a good question, and the biggest difficulty, go back to the basement plan, Ross, of City Hall, and in your booklets, that would be under Section 7 and page 28. And one of the issues is that the area that's green up here that engineering is in and the mailroom, those are the only areas that have windows to the exterior. So any other spaces, as far as using them for habitable space, is really bad space. Plus, there are some problems. Parts of City Hall in that basement actually extend under. They're outdoors. They're above some exterior spaces, and so they have some moisture potential issues. So you even have to be careful on your long-term storage that isn't going to get all musty on you.
Okay. And then I was wondering, I just can't remember, because we've been discussing just the idea of, growth of facilities in the future and so forth in our city. I just can't remember why we decided to just look out 3 to 5 years. That just doesn't seem very far to me, and I really appreciate your wonderful work, but it just seemed like that's such a short period of time that it.
Yeah, and I agree that it is a short period of time, but quite honestly, it's about as far as a department head can tell you if they're going to have staff changes. And so, even like we found last time, about 10 years ago when we did this, within 5 years, complete structure, even a commission changed to a council. A lot of things happened that changed the whole deal. And so it's really dangerous for us to go out much farther because people are just shooting from the hip and they really don't have a basis for anything.
And then my only other thought for right now, or question I guess I should say, is that, maybe it's more of a comment than a question, is that, I still kind of wish that there would be a possibility for us to sell the current City Hall, the historic building, and maybe to maybe to a hotel chain, make it a hotel or make it condos, and just start over and just build enough space for the next 30 to 50 years. And it's what really made me think of that is this summer when I had the opportunity to be in London, is that they took their old City Hall, County Hall, and they sold it to the Marriott Corporation, and they made it into a beautiful hotel at a great location. And then they, built a new building that really fit their current needs. And I'd still love to be able to do that, and I'd still love to have a partnership with the county.
Councilor Costello.
Well, only because Councilor Knudsen has sparked my interest on that. Bob, if you have 80,000 square feet of gross and you've got a shell that you're estimating is 180, and let's just say it's worth 200, I suppose that's a significant amount of money that you could put together if you could actually sell it for that. And if you added that to what your 13 million conversion cost, that'd be a lot of money to play with to build someplace new. But that was her idea, not mine.
Well, and that is one of the things on page 6 that we kind of put in the caveat down there, that we're really not considering value of, resale value. If you could get somebody that would offer you a nice number, that changes a lot of things.
Is that I mean, $200 a foot for a shell or 180 a shell? I'm just pulling that off of your...
Yeah, just as comparable, I would say that Sharapa, well, that's really
Right.
high end, but that's just talking about that office space. There was nothing in there finished that inexpensive. So I mean, you didn't get any spaces in that building for $180 between the shell and the build out. It was more like 190 to $225. So I'm talking about not going that high end.
Right.
Being more in the reasonable, what I'd call reasonable office space in Sioux Falls, in downtown, that wouldn't be the highest end, which is Courthouse Square and Sharapa. So that's kind of where you'd need to be in that. $120 for a shell, you really won't get up a building for a commercial, multi-story building for less than that in my mind. And then just to finish it out with $60, it's hard to do much on build-out nowadays too, unless it's just all wide open workstation space.
My main questions are, one, on your picture of the link, is it only one story, so it only comes off of the top level of the existing City Hall, or is it multiple?
Make sure I
floors?
understand.
So
This
it's
is just the walkway,
Yep.
and it is only one story. That's true. It's coming off third floor here, and it's actually above the building over here. And so you're having to extend the stairs and the elevator up to this level to tie them together.
Okay.
And so it wouldn't be until future stories. You actually could have 3 stories here, but one of them is mostly going to be in the ground. But 2 stories would align with things that are going on now in the annex, and could tie these buildings together.
The other question I had is, and I think you just touched on part of it, you said $60 for a remodel versus...
Well, $60 would be a tenant improvement. If you were inside a shell of a new building and you were going to build that out the rest of the way, $60 is what I would tell you is reasonable, where a developer might give you a $25 allowance, but $25 allowance, the time you throw ceiling in and carpet on the floor, most of the times they're not going to include the sprinkler heads and HVAC distribution. So, like I say, you wouldn't have got in there for $60 in either Sharapa or Courthouse Square, even if the building was built and you came into the existing space.
Okay, then we have under our renovations, though, you've got 73,000 square feet at $100. Do all 73,000 square feet need to be renovated, though?
No, not necessarily. I just took that at a higher end. And basically, though, what I was planning to do, let's say if we were down the road and we were really going to do this, let's go back, Ross, to the floor plan of City Hall. City Hall, even though it feels very inefficient today, if it were stripped completely clean, it just is a series of concrete columns within that, and you can see them buried, in this wall right here, and then they bounce this way like that. But you could clean this out, and you'd have nothing but open space with with the columns sticking up. That's the only way that you're going to make these floors efficient. In other words, you're going to have to recapture some of this huge wasted space, like in the second floor lobby, if you're really going to make things efficient in the building. And that means you virtually have to clean the building out from exterior wall to exterior wall. That's why I threw all those square feet in there.
Councilor Knudsen.
Mr. Winkles, would it be possible from a, very responsible economic standpoint to ever think about having a county city facility like down by the Shrapa, but because I realize that's, expensive property, but to then have housing, I'm talking about condos and apartments and so forth, on higher floors so that, that we made really good use of the space. And we're right there down by the river in an area that it would allow us to grow for our needs, because I can't imagine how much more space we're going to need in 30 years, let alone 50 years, the way our wonderful city is growing.
Sure, that's feasible, and that sounds like Uptown. I think if you talk to Jeff Hazard and Craig Lloyd, they'd fit you in a spot right now that's going to be like that.
I'd be interested in talking with them.
Yes, 'cause that's basically what that is residential above office space in the Uptown development there. Yeah, it's very feasible.
Mr. Staggers?
Yes, Bob, how many square footage is in the old Midland building?
Oh, let's see, that footprint is about, just did some figuring on that for someone here just recently. I want to say it's going to take 2 floors to get 35,000 square feet. So I'm going to say it's somewhere in the 18,000 square feet per floor. And I'd say if you count the basement, which they finished out, so you'd probably have about 72,000 is what I'm going to say.
72,000.
And that's probably a usable, rentable number. The gross is probably higher than that, 80 to 90,000.
What is the status of that building right now?
Don
Oh,
Dunham
Dunham.
and Clint Stencil have got control of it. They kind of bought it at a fire sale, if I want to call it that, but they're out there marketing that for office tenants.
And we still own the land under the building, is that right? City of Sioux Falls owned the land that it
No,
sits on?
not that I'm aware of. That's all private.
Oh, okay. I just thought we did.
Councilor Knudsen?
Well, I'm glad that Councilor Staggers mentioned that building, though, because a couple years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I was lusting after that building a little bit for a county facility. But I haven't been in that building for a long time, but I had heard that Mr. Dunham had purchased that building, but I think that would be an interesting conversation to have, too.
Councilor Anderson?
Question for Mike Cooper first, please, I guess. Mike, does the city own any other property around City Hall, across the street, or that could also play into adding on to the buildings that we have now?
The city owns land north of the 7th and Dakota parking ramp, west of the library.
So we don't own anything
We
across the
don't-
street to the west or anything there?
We
have-
currently do not own anything adjacent to this, or to the city hall,
Okay.
what I'll call the campus area.
I have another question for Mr. Winkles. After doing this survey and everything, what's your opinion on, even if we do spend this type of money over the next 5 to 10 years, is that facility and this property going to be, how long is that going to suit the needs of the city, do you believe, I guess?
Well, I think construction-wise and with the costs, if we brought them current as we go along, that you're going to be suited for a good 50 to 75 years from a construction standpoint. The only thing that we can miss on, it's a gut shot if our 25% expansion space is really going to cut it for you. And then, as we brought up, you could spend maybe 5% more on the construction of the foundations so that 2 floors could be added on this concourse space, and then I think you'd be out there ways.
And with the annex itself, is there any additions we can do to the annex itself, or is that building similar to City Hall? And
Yeah, it is maxed out. We did, 10 years ago, look at that seriously, because that was the time when we did this kind of report that we were looking at the library as maybe other use, engineering and whatnot going in there. And we went back to actually the engineers that were involved in that building when it was first purchased and renovated, and they told us, no, it can't go up any higher. We'd basically have to undercut the building, take the slab out, and tear the foundations. We'd have to go below with more foundations to go up any higher. We can't add to it.
okay. Now, would you think it might be also a good idea if, looking at that parking ramp that's in between the 2 buildings, would it be something to look at as far as maybe doing an underground parking ramp and building up on that? And then making that the connection between the 2?
Yes, that's feasible, just more money. And quite honestly, we were trying to not just Band-Aid, but we were trying to find the most economical way to then get all of the things solved, the best solution. And you could certainly do it that way, and that would give you more parking. This one would give us 150 new across the street, and then it would salvage about 2/3, so about 120 of the ones in the existing ramp, the way we're sitting today. But you'd still have some improvements you'd have to do to the existing ramp.
Thank you.
Councilor Costello.
Bob or Mike, do we own the annex or do we lease that?
You will own it in 2014. Like a lease with an option to buy, or that it is turning into a purchase in 2014, December, I think it is, that it's done. You own it.
Okay, what's the option to buy? How much is that going to cost?
Well, I think
Is
it's
there a
automatic.
buyout on it, or do we
Your
just-
lease payments are
The
the option. It's automatically, you're done with lease payments in December of 14, and you own it.
Councilor Knudsen.
Mr. Winkles, like on page 54, those, the phases for phases 4 and 5 and 6, you might have already said this, but I just can't remember, is there an inflation figure already built into those numbers?
Only to get you to 2009. I'm real comfortable that the numbers over on the right, let's say the parking ramp as an example, at 2.7 million, I think that's a good number for next year, but to try to guess what 2010 and beyond construction inflation is, we had to stop.
Councilor Jamieson.
Just one little question. I know you talked about space, office space utilization, maximizing the office space. What about efficiency? Does that go hand in hand? Or I guess what I'm really asking is, has the mayor looked at this and thought of how this would affect his day-to-day business and operations? I mean, is it going to be difficult for him to manage his day-to-day operations, or are we just making the most efficient use of every space and not considering that? Or have you considered all that?
Well, I don't know that I'm the right one to answer that question. We've had those discussions because we've had the department heads involved in this that would feel that interaction. So it might be more appropriate for them to answer, but the efficiency that we looked for was the efficiency of the space itself and how it is contiguous with another space and tying them so that nobody's going outside and everybody's interacting within those. I mean, the common sense side of that would say that's the best of both worlds, but and bringing some of them, like, I run into that when we bring a plan into building services, and they have to put a hold on it until Perry Bolden can get a look at it down on 37th in Minnesota, and we're kind of going back and forth. They got to call them over or something. Those are the kinds of hassles that I think would become a lot easier, but how the mayor would interact with others, I guess don't have a good feel for that.
Councilor Knudsen.
Mr. Winkles, I promise I'm almost done for today, but on page 48, when you mentioned the public service counter idea, which I really like, and which I'm not surprised at all that you have, that it's recommended. But I haven't visited Sioux City's City Hall, but I understand that it is very user-friendly, very one-stop shopping-ish, and that's a new word I just made up. But would that be what we kind of pattern out after how Sioux City is currently doing their one-stop shopping?
I have been there. That must have been it. I didn't realize. I have been there in Sioux City. Actually, we designed this. So before we did this, we went down and looked at Sioux City because a lot of the technology you have here, they had at that time. And but their lower levels, you know, that was a historic building that they took apart in pieces and actually marked every piece and put things back and then did some embellishment to it. But basically, you do come into a pretty large space, and I'd say it's probably at least, you know, maybe it's 1.5 times the width of this. And now I'm seeing counters, so whatever department, they've got the big headings, and I can go there, and actually, I can see the second level of that, too. I could go up the stairs, the elevator, and there's some more. And you can virtually get at somebody, and so they might be a person. You know, that's some difficulty in that, because that's how we kind of saw this concourse also between the annex and the city hall, because you are having to operate a little differently. It's not like that person that helped you at the counter can also go back and work on their desk or work with the rest of their department, because you can't have everybody's department right behind that facade. And so you need to know that you're going to have some people that are out there orphaned, and they'll either through email and internet or whatnot or intercom talk with the rest of their department, but they'll be dealing with the public direct.
Well, Bob, I had a couple of questions. With the 1919 annex, what was the original use for that building? Did you discover that?
It was an automobile dealership.
Okay, that brings me to my next question. How about architectural tie-ins? I mean, this building, or I mean, the building at City Hall looks, you know, to be quite different than the one on the corner. Was there transition using part of both, or would you? I guess I was trying to envision. Had you gotten that far even?
Well, yeah, we thought a blue building there would look really nice. No, we purposely stayed away from trying to design a building, you know, and but one of the things that would be positive about this kind of a scheme is that you want to separate it. You don't want to dominate City Hall. If you're really going to leave City Hall as a historic building, then it has to read like it did in society, you know, in 1935. And so I think it's important that we don't bump right up to it, especially with something that's a massive building. They have to respect that, and not so really on the other building, because that building in 1919 would have been about as close to a metal building as they could have built. I mean, they just kind of get her done, you know, and if that would have been done in the 1960s, it would have been a metal building that car dealer would have put up, because that's what they were putting up everywhere. And so that isn't, and it isn't on the historic register. So that's the most questionable one down the road, if you keep respecting it, or if 20 years from now or 15 years from now it might get out of the way and you do something else on that corner.
My other thought was, you know, anytime we build any building or parking ramp downtown, I think it'd be foolhardy to do anything but beef up that foundation so that we can go up, because you're so limited in where you're going to go after that. So that 5% is easy money for me to spend on anything. The other thing that I thought about, you know, if this the parking ramp across the street goes up and we minimize the parking ramp that's existing by your blue building, had we thought about having a skywalk from the parking ramp going across Dakota to tie into those?
Hadn't thought about it, but it certainly is a doable deal. You bet.
Then the other questions I had might be better for Mike here. You know, with fire admin and fire prevention coming back up off of Minnesota Avenue, what exactly are those departments? I know fire prevention, they've got the kids' smokehouse and some other equipment and stuff that, to me, would be better left off-site. Would you be talking about the departments of, you know, pure administration, pure administrative things, and then fire prevention would be the things where they do the plan checks and, you know, look at the sprinklers going and that sort of thing, so engineering would be available to them?
Yes, we're talking the administrative staff and the inspection plan review staff would be brought into City Hall.
Very good. I could see a lot of advantages to that, especially if you're trying to get something built. So, very good. Does anybody else have any questions of Ross or Bob? Dr. Staggers?
Yeah. Bob, just wondering, how much are we paying for the study here that we have?
How much we were paid?
How much? No, yes.
Okay, total, we did a first phase, actually the phasing was a second continuation. So total of everything with all the reimbursables was $48,500. The first one was $39,000 with fees and the printing reimbursables, and the second one was $9,500. That got us into the phasing in some of these graphics.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Well, Bob and Ross, I'd like to thank you guys for coming down here, and I'd like to thank you for the other things that you've been doing, putting up with us on the city, going for those bus tours, and being along to answer some questions on that. I know it makes for some long days sometimes, and I certainly appreciate getting to know both of you a little bit better through those efforts, and we'll just have to wait and see what the future says about the needs study here, the direction that this city wants to go in that. I think it's obvious we're going to have to do something sometime in the near future. So I guess we'll see how the money all works out and see what the future has to bring. So any other questions of Bob and Ross? Councilor Knudsen.
Hey, would you just remind me of what does the acronym GIS stand for? I mean, I know what it is, but all of a sudden I've just gone blank on what it stands for, and I was thinking the listening public might appreciate knowing when we talk about moving GIS here or there, that we tell them what it is. I know it's the
Geographic Information Systems.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I just wouldn't come to me.
You might see the arrows kind of satellite images and those.
I just thought that might be helpful to the public listening to our presentations.
Well, I want to say thank you. Appreciate doing this work for the city, and we're always here to help if you have some other questions.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Ross. Okay, now we're going to get back to, where are we at here? Yeah, public discussion. Any councilors have anything to bring forward to the good of the order? Councilor Knudsen.
Just two quick thoughts. I've just been thinking more about a legislative agenda for us, and I just thinking in relationship to the Metro Communications surcharge. I can't remember how long that it's been just 75 cents, and I know that the city pays for, I think, 75% of the Metro Communications budget, and the county pays for 25%, I believe. And I know a couple of you are working really hard on Metro Communications, but I just really wonder if this isn't the time for us to step forward and suggest that we raise that fee to $1. I realize we're making, it sounds like some good progress. I hope it's good progress on tracking down the cell business as far as Metro Communications is concerned. But I've just thought more about this topic, and I would still like to suggest that as a legislative priority. And then the only other thing I'd like to suggest, it kind of fits in with the legislative priority kinds of things, is that I'm going to get this copied and put this in your mailbox, but I'm a little bit of a news junkie. And in October 29th, 2008, USA Today, there's a really nice, concise chart that shows how South Dakota ranks if you combine the state and local tax burden as a percentage of average household income for fiscal year 2008. And I'm very proud to say that we are still incredibly low. We are ranked number 45th in the entire country at 7.9%. And I think we need to keep that in mind sometimes when we hear rhetoric. I know the campaigns a lot of them will be over tomorrow, and that will be refreshing for all of us. But I do think, once the campaign's over, we can all get back to even more and more work. And I just, think we need to keep moving forward, and we need revenue to do that.
I agree with you, Councilor Knudsen. Anything else for the good of the order? Councilor Jameson.
Just wanted to bring everybody up to speed. On Thursday, I went to climb the water tower on 57th Street, and I wanted to race Mark Cotter, but he wouldn't do it. So, but I guess it's an equivalent of climbing 15 stories high, and we climbed all the way to the top. It was a great experience. I learned a lot about the whole water storage systems that we have in Sioux Falls and how they actually get water into those water towers. Terry Schlotterback also climbed with us. he provided all the safety harnesses and made sure we made it up there safe. It was a great experience. I'd encourage the rest of you guys to do it. I saw some other people's names engraved and at the top, and I'm missing, there's a few people that aren't.
Was Councilor Costello's name up there?
I think I did see Pat.
Did you see that?
I saw a big one, though, from Bob Litz. Big. And anyway, great experience. I encourage anybody else, if they have a chance to do it, it's pretty safe. Pretty safe. Also, one other thing. Gerald, I want to make sure I got everything you need out of the Land Use Committee meeting. If there's still something else you want us to look for, I want to make sure we get that done. If you're looking for a policy maybe that affects every railroad crossing, let me know.
I frankly shouldn't comment until I've had a chance to read the report, so maybe next week I'll have some input.
Okay, great.
Anything else? Well, then I'd like to remind everybody fiscal meets right after this, and we stand adjourned.